Hi, everybody. I'm Lee Wind. I'm the director. No, what am I? What am I? I work for IBPA. I'm the Chief Content Officer. My job title changed like a year ago, so that's kind of ridiculous that I couldn't remember it. We're glad you're here. We are doing this IBPA PubU online webinar. It's NielsenIQ BookData, Global Book Trends in 2024, and Making Metadata Work for Your Book. These topics are pretty interconnected, but we do have two presenters, Chris and Suzy. So I am going to stop my share and I'm going to pass it on to Suzy. Chris, and say hi.
Yep. Hello. Glad to be here. I'll let Suzy kick off and go from there.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm just setting up my slides to look the way that they should. Hello. Yeah, I'm Suzy. I am a senior analyst and account manager for the UK research team for NielsenIQ BookData. So that's everything sales, data and trends and consumer insights. Specifically today, we're going to be looking at international book data across the 17 countries that NielsenIQ and GfK currently cover. So we merged with GfK in 2023, which expanded our coverage of countries, particularly over in Europe. These are the 17 countries that we currently cover print book sales tracking for. We collect all of this information via retailer panels. If you're wondering what a retailer panel is, I will tell you imminently, but just to run through those 17 countries, that's Australia, Belgium, which we split through Flanders, that's the primarily Dutch-speaking part, and Wallonia, that's the primarily French-speaking part. Brazil, Colombia, France, India, Ireland, Italy, Mexico, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Poland, Portugal, South Africa, Spain, Switzerland, which we split by the German-speaking part, and Romandy, which is the French-speaking part. Romandy is very new to our panel, so we won't be talking much about French-speaking Switzerland today. Most of the Swiss data you will see will be German-speaking only. And finally, of course, the UK. All of this information, all of our countries collect our data from retailers. A panel is a sample of retailers who willingly and voluntarily contribute to us. They record their consumer purchases and transmit them to us via shop electronic point of sale systems or online purchasing systems. The information that we collect from our retailers is the same across all 17 countries. It is the store, the ISBN, the quantity, the amount paid, and the purchase date. You might notice there's something missing here, and that's the metadata. Over in English language, we manage the metadata. Our non-English language territories, we collect from various different third parties who help us fill in all that information from the ISBN, things like the title, the author, the genre, information that can help us do the trend analysis that we do. And Chris will talk later about how important this kind of metadata is for doing anything in publishing. Now, in terms of market sizing, just to give you an idea, when we're looking at increases and decreases, it's useful to contextualize it with the actual size of the market. The biggest market that we currently cover is France. In 2024, we saw 315 million books bought in France, all the way down to our smallest territory, which is New Zealand, where 6 million books were bought. To put this into context, if every member of the population bought an even number of books and it was only citizens of that country buying books, that would be about 5 books per person in France and 1 book per person in New Zealand. It's a very literary nation, France. Now, breaking down how performance stacked up in 2024 compared to 2023 by volume, so that's books bought across all 17 of our countries, we did see the majority saw a slight dip in volume, but no double-digit drops, whilst a couple did see double-digit increases in volume, that being Mexico, India, and Colombia, although some of Colombia's increase will be due to panel expansion, so that's new retailers contributing data to the panel, and therefore we're seeing more book sales be contributed to us because of that. However, if we flip this over onto the value side of things, so that's money spent, you will notice some of these, a couple have switched from the red to the green, that being South Africa and the Netherlands. which though they saw less books bought, they did see more money spent on books. And for many that did see dips in the number of books bought, there was a smaller dip in the money spent. This is unsurprising when we think about inflation and global prices increasing. And when we look at average selling price, so this is the average money spent on a book per country, you can see that this has increased broadly across the board, apart from in Australia and New Zealand, which saw very slight dips in the average price bought for a book. Bear in mind, all of these figures are in the local currency and not adjusted for local or global inflation. That's the overall view of things, but what if we break it down by broad sector? So your fiction, your non-fiction, your children's. We've got our 17 countries here. Colombia's not on here because it's so new. We can't do year-on-year comparisons yet because of all the panel expansions. But for those that we can, this was that overall total market number we saw, and this is by value. So the money spent. So this is overall, yes. The next one is fiction, so in the lighter blue that's shown up here. And you may notice that all except one territory is above that line in the green for adult fiction, that being New Zealand. And the drop that New Zealand saw in spending on adult fiction was very small, 0.7% compared to 2023. So a really strong year for adult fiction, suggesting a worldwide desire for escapism. Lots of big trends in fiction on social media and elsewhere that are really helping boost this up across the world. Over in children's, we did see increases for 9 territories, with Flanders and Switzerland, the German-speaking part, seeing growth despite an overall dip in value. In children's textbooks, we saw a particularly large increase for India and a particularly large drop for Ireland. Now, this dip for Ireland was due to a change in legislation in how textbooks are purchased. There was a big amount of funding given by the government to provide free textbooks to primary school students. Previously, the way it worked in Ireland is individuals would go and purchase the textbooks from the retailers, which is why we were picking up the sales. But this dipped a little bit because of the new legislation. So that's why you see that particularly big drop in Ireland. Over in non-fiction, adult non-fiction, this is the area that has suffered in particular, certainly in the UK. This is often the area we've been seeing the biggest drops year on year over the past few years. We saw only 6 territories to see overall growth in non-fiction. So the Netherlands saw a dip, even though it saw overall growth and it saw growth in children's and fiction, it saw a little bit of a dip in non-fiction. Since it was such a grand year for adult fiction, it was particularly a grand year for genre fiction, our fantasy, our romance, our crime and our thrillers. So it was useful to break down where we could these genres and whether or not they saw a particularly big peak in sales and money spent. So this is again by value in 2024 compared to 2023. So we looked at our 3 key genres, that being SFF, or science fiction and fantasy, romance, and crime, thriller, and adventure. So crime and thriller, most territories again saw a big old peak, particularly for the Netherlands. This was likely helped massively by their overall #1 bestseller. That was a D Camino by Anya Navera. This won a CPMB Golden Book Award 2024. This is awarded using sales data collected from GfK. It actually hit platinum in January of 2025 for selling over 3.5 million copies in the Netherlands since its publication. This is very significant. Over here in the UK, we have something called the Bestseller Awards. It's very similar. And to hit platinum here, you have to sell 1 million copies. And we are a bigger market than the Netherlands, so it's a really massive, massive achievement for Anya. Over in romance, the French language proving the stereotype that it is the language of love, seeing the biggest in percentage increases in value there, both France and French-speaking Belgium, seeing the biggest increases. But out of our 3 genres, it was really fantasy, science fiction and fantasy, that was the real winner, seeing increases in all territories that we were able to measure genre level growth in. You may be wondering why. Lots of different reasons. For the most part, anything considered romantasy generally falls into the fantasy category rather than the romance. It's generally considered fantasy first in classification. So many of those viral sensation romantasies, if you have been keeping up with Book Talk, fall into this category and have done massive things to help boost up the genre as a whole. There have also been some big non-romantasy books, things like Dune in the sci-fi side of things with the film adaptation, The House of the Dragons, and also some other media helping boost up the category as well. But speaking of fiction, let's break it down by top 5. So we're talking about top 5 fiction titles across 17 territories, right? So that's 90 possible placements we've got here. Across those 90 possible placements, we saw 59 different authors hit the top 5 spots. And of those, there were 5 authors that saw more than 2 placements across all countries, the top dog of which was Colleen Hoover, arguably the queen of Book Talk, one of the original success stories of being boosted by Book Talk. And now with the film adaptation of It Ends With Us, seeing another influx of growth for this book. It was mostly It Ends With Us and It Starts With Us that saw these top spots, but Verity also saw a top 5 placement in Brazil. 9 top 5 placements across 6 different countries. And not just English-speaking countries, we did see the Spanish and Portuguese translations also do well in Mexico and Brazil. Brazil in particular, big fan of Colleen Hoover. Next on the top list is From Love to Murder, Frida McFadden. Saw 7 top 5 placements across 5 different countries. Switching, again, the Portuguese translation doing well in Portugal, but also the French translation in France. We also then, from another top crime author, but a Swiss author, Joel Dicker. This is one we don't often see outside of core Europe, particularly the Romance languages really sticking together with this one. The top 4 countries that we saw being French-speaking Belgium, Italy, France, and Spain. He's really massive in France, always does really well, Joel Dicker, but often not seen outside of Europe. So one to look out for. We then had Gabriel Garcia Marquez, his posthumous novel, Until August, hit a lot of top placements, particularly in the Spanish-speaking world, but also in the Portuguese-speaking world. So top 4 placements across 3 different countries. In Colombia, we did see a special edition of 100 Years of Solitude also hit the top 5 spot alongside Until August. Our final top author is another crime and thriller author. He's a French author, Guillaume Musso. Always does well, again, specifically in our French-speaking countries, that being Belgium and France. So 3 top 5 placements in 2 territories, 2 appearances from Angelique. This is the paperback edition of his latest thriller, which was originally published in hardback in 2022. We also did see 10 authors that saw 2 top 5 placements, and then the remaining 44 had 1 placement. So big spread of different authors, both local and global favorites. How does that break down? You're about to see a really big wall of books. Try not to get too overwhelmed. We'll break it down. There's all our Colleen Hoovers. You can see the English, the Spanish, and the Portuguese there. We've got Frida McFadden in French, English, and Portuguese. Got Joel Dicker there in French and Portuguese, Italian. We've got Gabriel Garcia Marquez. We've got Guillermo Musso. And then we have got everybody who had 2 authors. So Sarah J. Maas, another romantasy favorite there. Some popular classics, The Alchemist. Some TV tie-ins there with the Book of Bill. And then everybody else who had 1 book featured in the top 10 for fiction. We move now from fiction to non-fiction. I broadly tried to break these down into sort of broad category. There is often disagreement across countries on which categories certain books fall into. I've tried to group them as best as I can. The top category was self-help, 36 of the 90 placement going to books in the sort of self-help and self-improvement range of things, 11 of those specifically being by James Clear, 10 specifically being Atomic Habits. This is a perennial global bestseller, a huge favorite, often worldwide, and you will see it a lot even in the overall top 5s. A big classic. Next, memoirs, biographies, personal stories. 5 of those being Philippe Boxeau. He is a mortician from France who tells personal stories about the bodies that he has prepared and various funny anecdotes from his time as a mortician. These do particularly well in the French-speaking countries. 13 cookbooks, 4 of which are Nagi Mahashi. She is an Australian-born author who is very, very popular down under. 4 placements for her, both across Australia and New Zealand, 2 each. We've got 6 dictionaries and educational, so anything that falls under the sort of practical and manual and sensible. The overall #1 bestseller for South Africa, specifically being a driver's manual. Always nice to see that we care about safe driving. 5 in the family, health and relationships. So this is anything to do with parenting, dieting, health, food, and our relationship too. 2 of those specifically being Essie Inchauspe of Glucose Goddess fame. She's a French author that writes in English. However, neither of the top placements were in either English or French. Instead in German and Polish, in Switzerland and Poland, respectively. 4 for history and popular science. 2 of those specifically being Yuval Noah Harari's latest book, Nexus. Again, neither in his native language of English, both being translations that hit the top spot there. We've got 3 under the spiritual and religious, 2 of which being a classic Brazilian favorite. This translates to Coffee with Father God. This is kind of a guided diary type thing that gives advice and instructionals on Bible readings, spiritual journeys and reflections that always sells really well. It was both the 24 and 23 or 25 editions that sold and hit the top 5 last year. Got 3 that were sort of difficult to define, 2 of which were the Guinness World Book of Records. It's a perennial favourite over here in the UK. It was the overall #1 non-fiction book in the UK for last year. And then the 3rd was an Irish language learning book. It wasn't quite an educational book. It was more sort of contemporary words you should know. Fun fact, there was a particularly big spike in Irish language learning books in Ireland last year, which is very exciting to see for those who are enthusiastic about the native language. And finally, 2 quiz and trivia books. One of which being G.T. Garber's very own Myrtle, very, very popular over here in the UK. We love a bit of Myrtle. The second book is an Italian book, and we will talk about it when I show it to you on here. We're going to break it down just like we did last time. There's all of our James Clears across many different languages. You've got Spanish, you've got Polish. You've mostly got, they really love it in the Spanish-speaking territories, but also in Poland and in Switzerland. The rest of our self-improvement, a shout out there to Thomas Eriksson and Marion Rojas Estape, who also saw multiple placements. There's our Philippe Boxeau in the French-speaking, and the rest of our memoirs and personal stories, our cookbooks, our dictionaries, our family health and relationships, our popular science, our spiritual, our other, and finally, our trivia and quiz. Right down there at the bottom of the Italian top 5, you will see the second trivia and quiz book. This is crime and mysteries to solve whilst you are having a poo. Now, I was told recently that it's a very British thing to have books that are things you can do whilst you're on the loo. This is apparently very British. However, counter argument, I would like to say, clearly it's not. Italians like it too. I felt embarrassed that we had a weird fixation about books to use whilst on the loo, but I'm happy to say we are not alone. Italians too like trivia and quiz whilst in the bathroom. Finally, we will do children's. Children's, always an interesting one. In the UK, in the past 5 years or so, we've seen a decline in the sales of children's fiction, but an uptick in graphic novels has been doing spectacularly well for this younger age range. But it always features really heavily in the top titles. So we saw 37 different middle grade fiction placements, 8 of which were Jeff Kinney of Wimpy Kid fame, and 6 were Dave Pilkey of Dogman fame, formerly Captain Underpants fame. Those who know. This is a particularly massive series at the moment. We found in the UK and in Ireland, the Dogman series, and it has recently had a film adaptation, which will probably help boost it up even more. True romantasy fans may have noticed there wasn't a lot of Yaros, Rebecca Yaros, in the fiction top fives. So our Spanish-speaking territories actually classify these books under YA. When doing this kind of cross-territory analysis, I try not to move around books based on my own home country assumptions. So I kept them in the YA category, even though we here in the UK and English language, we categorize Rebecca Yaros's books as adult. Where many places have different definitions of what young adult means, where it begins in terms of age range, which is why some of these type of books that may be seen as new adult to us may be classified as YA. Chris will expand more on why metadata is so important, and this is why robust metadata is so important to make sure consumers and retailers are making informed choices about the content of the book, where to place it in store, and who to buy it for. Another TikTok favorite, Lauren Roberts, who is stalwartly YA, also saw 4 top 5 placements this year, all in the native English language. Even though one of those placements was in Belgium, it still was the English language edition that sold the best. 16 in the early years, so that's picture books, preschool, early learning type things. There were no repeat authors across territories, although Rachel Bright, who is a British author, saw 2 top 5 placements over in Portugal. And we did see 2 Bluey books, of course, in her native Australia and also in Poland. 9 non-fiction, 2 of which were Taylor Swift themed in Australia and the UK. Of course, celebrating the Eras Tour last year. Yes, I did go, in case you were asking. We did also see another pop star, blonde pop star, indeed, themed book. Camille, who is a very popular Belgian pop star, also tends to have popular non-fiction sticker and activity pack books always in her native Belgian. And finally, 8, dictionary, textbooks, and study guides, everything school related. And how does that break down visually? So there's our Jeff Kinney, our Dave Pilkey, of course, the rest of our middle grade fare. Our Rebecca Yaros there, you see it's all the Spanish language editions of the first 2 books in the Imperial series. Our Lauren Roberts, the rest of our YA, our early learning, our non-fiction starting with Taylor Swift, and our textbooks, study guides, and dictionaries. If we put all of this together and we do overall sales, how does it look? How do all of these different sectors match up against each other? Well, the winner was still James Clear, making 9 top 5 appearances in the overall, so being knocked out of only 2 spots compared to just looking at non-fiction. Frida McFadden was next on the list with 4 placements. So even though Colleen Hoover had more overall fiction placements, she was actually knocked out of more overall spots than Frida was. But there, Colleen is in Brazil and the UK. Also a shout out to popular self-help author Marian Rojas Estape. We've also got 3 placements for Marquez, 2 for Thomas Erickson, 2 for Joel Dicker, 2 for Sarah J. Maas, another romantasy favourite, 2 for popular crime and thriller author in the Dutch-speaking world, Melissa da Costa, and then all the rest were singular placements, many of which we have already seen throughout this presentation. That is everything from me. Thank you very much. I believe we do Q&A now.
Yeah, wow. Suzy, that was so cool. I love those slides. It is fascinating to think that you like the bigger thing about like, you know, fantasy and like reading and meaning behind these trends is really interesting. But it's also fascinating to see that across 17 countries in different parts of the world, that we're seeing that you are seeing these trends. That's amazing. Do we have questions from folks? You can put them in the Q&A or you can put them in the chat. Was there something, Suzy, this is something you do on a regular basis. Was there something that surprised you when you were going through the data?
Do you know what was really interesting, actually? The Indian overall #1 this year was a fiction book, and that's really uncommon. They're a very, very non-fiction heavy, and they're a very classics heavy market. It's really interesting. But this year it was a contemporary romance book in Malayalam, which is one of their native languages. And it's only the 10th most spoken language in India. It's a really big success for them. I think it's really interesting, and it's being adapted into a film as well. I found that particularly fascinating.
Something else about India that I noticed was that textbook, was it, am I remembering it correctly, that
Yeah.
textbook sales were like skyrocketed? And I'm like, what was that about?
Yeah, it's often to do with purchasing changes, shifts in panels. It's probably around that. But yeah, they're very educationally minded, normally in their book buying.
Hmm, super cool. Um, how do you, when you're looking at the when you're trying to figure out from the ISBN and you're backing out into like figuring out what the book is, are you looking at thema codes, or are you looking at, I mean, BISAC is really a North America thing. So
Yeah, so it's thema that we primarily use, certainly now in the UK, to map to our product classes. And thema was obviously made to be as international as possible. So we're encouraging publishers to use it more and more. Our old version, BIC, has now become obsolete. So we're encouraging all our UK publishers to use thema. But yeah, that is our primary use. We do use BISAC a little bit. We store BISAC on our system because it is still used widely in North America. But theme is my favorite. I would say I'm thema biased. I think it's great and it helps us drill down into the nitty gritty. Over here in the UK, we can do things like look at romantasy, look at specific trends and within genres as well.
cool. We do have a bunch of questions, so maybe turn off your slides so we can see you,
Sure.
and let's jump into them. Uh, do you anticipate significant changes in this upcoming year due to the tariffs, the on and off nature of the tariffs coming from the US?
It's really hard to say, and it will depend a lot on the territory and where exports come from. Because there's often, fortunately, I know that having spoken to a couple of clients that currently it's not planned that books are going to be tariffed. Um, and I'm not sure about, it's just more about the supply chain that might be impacted that we're not so sure about. A lot of children's books are printed in China. This is the way that it is. So that might be the place that is impacted the most. But more and more so, things are being printed and sourced locally. So I'm hoping that publishing won't fare as badly as maybe other areas.
Got it. Thank you. Cynthia's asking, do you have more of a breakdown of children's early years books?
We do. It depends on the territory, which is why I kept it a bit vague, because we all do things a little differently. Over in the UK, picture books are really big for us, and we have a whole different category for that. It's a really important part of our market. However, in other parts of Europe, they have something they more call a storybook, which I'm told is very different to a picture book. But it's also very different to a middle grade book or a graphic novel. It's its own kind of thing. That's its own kind of category that makes it a bit difficult to compare between countries sometimes. And then we kind of have the early learning stuff. So that's things that particularly do well in India about like learning to write, handwriting, that kind of thing that is like preschool. So it's not quite educational, but is still focused on learning skills. Um, but yeah, it's difficult, but it is possible. Certainly in the UK, we break it down by picture books, preschool early learning, and novelty and activity. So that's things like colouring and sticker books aimed at younger children.
Cool, thank you. Ronnie's asking to a bit more about thema. It's actually THEMA, I believe.
Yes.
And that's it's a system. Let me see how I do. So in the US, we use a system called BISAC, which is not as highly regarded as thema. I think because thema enables you to categorize what a book is about with multiple I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but like you can drill down better because you can combine terms. Can you give an
Yeah.
example?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
there an example off the top of your head, Suzy, that you can explain?
So there is a theme code for fantasy romance. There is a sort of base code and then you get a subcode. So you've got fantasy and then you've got fantasy romance, you've got epic fantasy, you've got historical fantasy, etc. Or you can have a romance and then you've got a contemporary romance, a historical romance, a romance about time travel. They get really specific. And then on the non-fiction side, it's really, really sweet. It can be really specific because then you have specific sports. What kind of sport is it? Is it a biography? Is it a memoir? And you can combine these to get a really good idea of what the topic of the book is. So you can have up to 10 theme or subjects assigned to one book, and then you can also have qualifiers, which I kind of consider specifiers. So if it's about a certain country, like a travel guide for Japan would have a qualifier for Japan, or a language learning book would have a qualifier for the language it's in. Same for fiction books that are focused on certain countries, areas, groups of people, you can have qualifiers for. So it's really helpful as well when looking at diversity and inclusion, because you can specify if the book's about a certain group, whether that's ethnicity, whether that's sexuality, gender. It's very useful. It's great, and we love it. You can go on the editor site, that's EDITEUR, for more information. There is a full and delicious guide on all the different theme codes if you like spreadsheets, like I do.
Suzy, can you pop that link into the chat? That would be great to share also with people that are watching the recording. Christine had a question about any explanation for so few books on science, natural science.
It depends on the territory. I often find with those kind of books, you don't get like bust out bestsellers because we were only doing top fives. A lot of them will filter in. I did find in the UK we saw a slight dip in spending on those kind of books last year. Sort of anything in the sort of natural pop sciencey kind of sphere. But that's coming off the back of a couple of really strong years. But yeah, we haven't really had as many big breakout sellers, I think, as compared to like self-help, which has really dedicated followings to like a very small number of books. You know what I mean? Like Atomic Habits. Whilst I find with natural history, it tends to be a bit more broader across authors, so they don't always hit those big spots.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. There is a question about metadata that Ronnie has, but let's hold off until we hear Chris's sharing about metadata, and then we'll circle back to it if we still don't know. Chris, we're going to pass the baton to you now.
I'm hoping we can see my screen.
Yes.
Yep.
Looks beautiful.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Well, hello everyone. My name is Chris Pow. I am a senior business development manager here at Nielsen BookData. I've been with the company for just over 7 years now. And in that time, I've worked across the kind of full data journey, from helping publishers to improve and supply their metadata, to supporting retailers in accessing and using that data kind of effectively as well. So today, I will be talking about the importance of metadata. So what it is, why it matters, and how getting it right can make a real difference to discoverability and sales. So, what is metadata? Let's start with a simple definition. Metadata is the information that describes a book. So it includes what I kind of I put it in kind of three pots. So the basics, things like the title, the author, the ISBN. Then you've got the commercial, so the price, availability, format. And then thirdly, the kind of descriptive elements. So blurb, long and short descriptions, author bio, keywords, table of contents, and a hell of a lot more. This information is used at every stage, whether it be by a publisher, a distributor, retailer, libraries, and of course also readers as well. So why is it important? Because metadata powers discoverability. If your book can't be found, it can't be read, it can't be bought. I kind of use this as think of it as the oil in the publishing engine. Without it, the supply chain is going to struggle. From warehouse to website to the shelf, metadata powers that journey. And good metadata isn't just admin. and it can feel like it at times. But it really does have real commercial value to your business. If the data isn't right, your books risk being invisible. Certainly, in that global market, if the data is strong, you give it the absolute best chance for it to succeed. So Nielsen book data, there's kind of two splits here. One with the kind of metadata my side, and Suzy with the book scan side of the business. So we support the metadata ecosystem. We act as a metadata aggregator. So I'm using metadata a lot here. Collecting, organizing, distributing book information globally. And also to add, we run the UK ISBN agency as well. So touching on that is what I mean by this is, so we will collect metadata, we will collect data, book information about books from the publishers, and also other means, so distributors in some cases. We will standardize and validate that information, and then we distribute it to over 3.5 global partners, including businesses like booksellers, wholesalers, schools, libraries. Obviously, we're not a retailer ourselves, but we power how many retailers operate. That includes well-known names like Waterstones over here in the UK, Amazon, eBay, World of Books, Bookshop.org. We also support discoverability across library systems, academic tools, online marketplaces, as touched on just a minute ago. So when your metadata is with Nielsen, it's available to thousands of businesses to connect those books with readers. So I thought I'd add here kind of a heat map of where we're actively distributing data, and that is across 87 countries. So it is a truly global network, particularly strong in the English language markets. And I know I've already touched on the type of businesses that kind of use data, but just to add on to that, you've got people like national library suppliers, global wholesalers, obviously retailers, but large and small, so independent bookshops as well, really, really important. Schools, universities, and then kind of tech platforms. What I like to say, tech platforms, so online websites, apps, discovery tools, recommendation sites. If your goal is global reach, getting your book seen in multiple markets, we can help you get there. So just talking, I wanted to kind of touch on what I kind of refer to as the core building blocks. So the kind of essential metadata every book needs. These are kind of non-negotiable. So fields that publishers must get right. Reason being is, retailers, wholesalers, distributors, they rely on them to list, sell, and distribute the book. So attributes things like ISBN, that's your book's fingerprint. No ISBN, no tracking, no trailing. It also carries your publisher's name, which is obviously part of your brand. Title, keep it distinct, short, and easy to search. Contributor, so use consistent naming for authors, editors, illustrators across its formats and editions. Why? Because it helps the end reader find the book that they're looking for. Format, now be specific. Say, if it's a paperback, it's a paperback, not just book. You'll be surprised there's people that do that. So, be specific on the actual format of the title. Publisher and imprint obviously identifies the brand behind the book and also adds credibility. Publication date, we recommend supplying information, including the publication date, at least 4 weeks advance before it is published. Why? Because it helps drive pre-orders potentially. Sales rights, it's essential in the global markets. Product properties. So what I mean by that is pagination, audio duration, language matter, supply them all. weight and dimensions, obviously very, very critical for shipping, shelving, and actually also online display, so on websites. Of course, at the early birth of a book, you may not know those dimensions, so estimate if needed. And once you have that physical book in your hand and those dimensions, then you can go and update accordingly with the correct measurements. Price and availability. Obviously, retailers need to know how much, where, and where they can get it. It's also a data element or I will refer to as a dynamic data field. Why is because it's not static. You don't just provide a price and availability and that's it. It could change, so it's forever changing. It's dynamic. Classifications, as we've already touched on earlier, use accurate thema codes and also BISAC codes. They guide discoverability of books. Series, name the collection, keep the naming consistent to group the titles correctly. Edition, include the edition number and whether the text has changed. Cover image, massively important. It's the book's first impression. Use, a clear professional image. Try and avoid using placeholders. And then kind of finally, audience. Set the correct audience code to make sure that the book reaches the right readers. Before a reader ever sees a book, it's kind of this data that will decide where it shows up and how it's presented. So getting the foundations right will help build visibility, hopefully more sales, and also trust with readers and retailers and so on.
Chris, can I pop in with a quick question, please?
Absolutely.
Is audience code something that's a thema thing? Because I don't recognize that from the BISAC world.
No, so it's completely separate to Thema. I'm not sure. There may be some direct link within Thema. There may because there's so many different types of codes. But audience, while I'm talking about audience codes, so we have you can kind of set it to be higher education, for example. So they will be covered under Thema. But yeah, it's just making sure what you have listed against your title is where you kind of want to push that towards to the end reader, for example.
So for children's books, that would be like an age range or something.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah,
Got it. Thank you for clarifying.
that's right. So core metadata kind of gets your foot in the door, in the front, in the door. But it's the descriptive metadata that kind of sells the books. So that's where kind of this aspect comes in. So you can enrich your listings by using short and long descriptions. So we advise to supply both, not just one or the other. Why? Some systems, like cataloging systems, unfortunately have limitations that they can only ingest certain number of characters, for example. So if you're only supplying a long description, you're going to be restricting yourself there. So do supply both. Keywords, these drive search results on retail sites, SEOs. Promotional text, phrases like winner of the Booker Prize can help grab attention. Author biography, so help build reader trust, highlight previous work, and table of contents, which is more specific and especially useful for, kind of non-fiction academic titles. And then lastly, reviews. Even one positive sentence from a blogger or a critic really helps. I've also put some interesting figures here and I've pulled them from our white paper. So our white paper is kind of some research we've done, which looks at the direct link between good metadata and sales. And one of the things that we saw is titles that had at least 5 descriptive elements, on average, sold around about 2,300 copies. Comparing that to books that had no descriptive elements, sold just over 750. So titles with descriptive elements almost sold more than triple. Really kind of highlighting, adding richer metadata really does make a difference. And yeah, if anyone would like the full report, I can share that with Lee, and we can kind of get that distributed out after the webinar as well.
That'll be great. Chris, one more question that's coming from Laura, asking about best practices re short versus long descriptions in the metadata. Should there
Yep.
be completely different language in case both feed out together, or should the short description be an abbreviated version of the longer?
So the short description is just kind of a brief um, attention-grabbing phrase, really. I think we advise no longer than 350 characters. So it's just kind of like a short snippet, brief description of the book, whereas the long description is what you would typically find as like the blurb on an actual physical book. So it's like a shorter version.
So, but would you duplicate language? Like, if would you put the that 350 character pull quote thing to grab people's attention in the longer version as well
I
and
mean,
repeat
you
it?
can do. You can do. Yeah, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. It's yeah, there's nothing stopping you from doing that if you wanted to.
But
Obviously, I would.
would somebody end up seeing both? Like, would they end up, is there a situation where they would be reading both, one and then the next?
A lot of the time, so when we're saying, so a lot of the times, let's say, for example, a retailer, a lot of the time they will not necessarily utilize both on their website. They will pick one or the other. So they won't use, so you would never see, if I went onto Waterstone's website right now, and I, as a publisher, had both a short description and a long description for my title, you wouldn't see both appearing on their website. They would most likely use just the long description. So yeah, it would never duplicate. Um, on like an outward
Super,
facing situation. Yeah.
super helpful. Thank you. You said that the
All right.
short description was about 350 characters. How long can a long description be?
We recommend it can be up to 64,000. It can be a lot. Again, I probably wouldn't recommend that amount, but yeah, it can be up to about 64,000.
Cool. And just to get totally nerdy for a second, are you including the spaces when you say 350 characters or 64,000 characters?
Just no, that is just like the letters. So no space, no paragraphs. Is that what you
So
mean?
so you don't count a space.
No.
Oh, that's good. And Stephanie, thank you for the question for asking about how long the long description should be
Yes.
or
Yeah.
can be.
Where are we? Yeah, so we with the white paper, I can share that with you, Lee, and we can get that distributed out if people want to have a little nosy through that as well.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So I just wanted to connect that as part of our research business, we have a panel of book buyers that we kind of use to see what influences their purchases. Um, And when we asked those book buyers, why did you buy or what influenced your purchase? The most important influence in 2024 was subject and genre, with over a quarter of purchases chosen because of this. Nearly as important and also kind of echoing the role in helping with the discovery of authors. We then found 1 in 6 purchases were influenced by descriptions or the blurb of the book, and a kind of similar proportion were because of they liked the series. 1 in 8 purchases were driven by the appeal of a front cover in 2024, and you'd be surprised how many publishers don't supply front cover images. Um, while nearly as many bought on the strength of recommendation review, influenced by a low price, or because they simply like the characters. Now, the last 2 places in the kind of top 10 influences were a look inside and gift requests with the same share. Now, obviously, there are reasons for buying books. The reason for buying books really does depend on a massive variety of factors. But again, what I'm trying to highlight here is there is a clear and direct link between strong, detailed metadata, like subject, series, description, and book sales. So just kind of summarizing the impact of getting metadata right. Good metadata does a lot more than just describe a book. It actively drives its success. Uh, First, it boosts discoverability, making your titles more visible to booksellers and readers around the world. It also helps you achieve a global market reach, opening up access to international audiences. Sales performance improves too. As kind of just mentioned here previously, our research shows, that books with enriched metadata consistently do sell better, generating more revenue. With direct retailer links, your titles are flagged as available more quickly, speeding up the kind of stocking process. Better category placement also matters. So going back to the thema, improved metadata helps stores put your books exactly where the readers are most likely to find them. And a lot of stores will use that classification to ensure that book is placed on X shelf within their store. And then finally, increase customer trust. Accurate, well-maintained metadata does reassure buyers that your book is professional, reliable, worth purchasing. It's it's a small investment of time and attention that can really pay off in discoverability and sales. So, how do you get started? Oh, did you have a question, Ellie?
Yeah, we had two questions pop in, but
Yeah.
and then I was like, wait, oh, perhaps I should wait.
Okay,
Um,
we can go from now if you like, or do you want to wait?
uh,
I'm nearly at the
yeah,
end, to be fair.
go finish up and then we'll do the
Okay.
questions. Sorry.
Okay. Perfect. Um, so how do you get started? There are two options. One being Nielsen Title Editor, which is a free platform to use as on online web portal essentially that allows you to manually add, update, maintain your information. We also support Onyx, which of course is the industry standard of data exchange. So if you have the means to send Onyx, we can also set up direct feeds. But either method feeds directly into our database, and then from there down to the kind of downstream customers. So I just wanted to quickly summarize that metadata has a commercial value to your business. It's vital that your core metadata is accurate and up to date. Use descriptive metadata, including images, to increase that discoverability. And then finally, good metadata is the foundation stone of your promotional and marketing activity. Thank you very much for listening.
Cool. I will chime in here. You can stop sharing your slides and then we'll see you for the questions. Nikki is asking, should metadata be the same across formats? Is it more important for print books? I've been told some is left off normally for audiobooks.
I would say absolutely every single format. Yeah, absolutely. It shouldn't. I appreciate that maybe there are some formats like audio that might have a lesser amount of metadata, but every single format's just as important as the other. So it's essentially the more information you can get out there, the better. Kind of full stop, really. Yeah.
But let me actually lean into this a little bit because like an audiobook is going to have a narrator that may not be the author.
Yeah.
So the information about the narrator, you wouldn't include that in the print version of that book, right?
No,
Like,
so yeah, so I mean, the author biography, for example, would be the author. You would have the narrator labeled as a contributor, but from experience and from the past of working with other publishers, they wouldn't necessarily have an author biography regarding to the narrator. It will be the author of the book, but you would still have the narrator listed as a contributor, obviously, for that particular format.
I guess I was wondering if you have a narrator and that has a following, do you want to make a big deal of that in the metadata for just the audiobook version?
I mean, you could do. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's nothing stopping you from doing that at all. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And then Mary is asking, genres can be articulated in a variety of ways. Is there a preferred glossary for identifying genre? And I'm wondering if that's thema, but maybe there's something else.
Yeah, so thema would be the classification scheme that we would push you and advise you to look at. And as Susie kind of touched on, you know, there's a lot of subcategories under the major headings, i.e. fiction, that you can kind of really nail down into it. And you don't have to do that. But you know, we have at Nielsen, we have in-house classifiers. So if anyone did have any questions regarding the classification, we have a number of people in our team that can kind of provide further advice on that for sure.
Do you map your classifications to thema and to BISAC, or is it?
Yes.
We map the
Yeah.
product classes from thema. So it kind of goes the other way. Yeah, goes. We take the thema that publishers give us, and then we map to one of our product classes.
Hmm,
And
that's
then
interesting.
we will do mapping externally in the sense of what I mean by that is if you provide us thema codes, we will then automatically map that to BISAC codes and other classifications as well. So essentially, you know, you can just provide just a one thema code and we will do the automatic mapping on your behalf, essentially, when we then push that out to the trade.
I was just at a presentation last week, and they were talking about the merchandising codes that come with BISAC that are sort of like, if you think your book is appropriate for like Father's Day, you could tag it with a Father's Day thing, and that could be a mix of like, you know, a poetry book or a comedy book or a book to read solving
Yeah.
mysteries while you're on the toilet. Uh,
Yeah.
is there something similar on the thema side?
Good question. And I don't know. I can find out for you. But I mean, one thing I would say is you can go down a bit of a rabbit hole with classifications sometimes. And I would kind of advise not to keep it as basic as possible, but just don't overcomplicate it because what will happen is it will confuse people later down the journey, down the line, that metadata journey. Let's take for a retailer, for example. I've got so many different conflicting thema codes. They won't know how to map that into or where they should be mapping that into their website, for example. So that's probably my top tip is just you can go down a rabbit hole with it, but just be mindful of not overcomplicating it.
For your specific question, though, it would be a qualifier because it's for a specific occasion, and there is indeed a qualifier for Father's Day.
Yep, there you go.
Cool. That's good to know. Ronnie's asking, sorry, not to take us too far down the cul-de-sac of thema, but can we list with thema or just use it to determine classes? Is thema a service or just a reference set?
Thema is the industry standard or it's the industry classification scheme. So that is, you don't have to use that, but that is the classification scheme that many businesses will be using to map within their EPOS systems, cataloging systems. Um, so yeah, if you head over to editor, they've got like um, a map tree, and you can even type it. There's a little search bar, so you can type in, and it will pull you out the exact codes that's relevant to what you know, whatever genre you've just typed in there. So it's a very useful site.
Cool. Nikki's asking, with series, should which book in this series, one of three, two of three, etc., be part of the metadata?
Yes, yeah. So you make sure that you're labeling those as series. We then actually internally we do another mapping and it's called related products or what's the other I think it's related products, so basically we can group it together, so when we're sending that information out, it's very easy for a retailer to know, okay, those three ISBNs which are part of a series are grouped series, so they can kind of, you know, they can do what they need to do on their website, for example. If they have like a specific tab for series, they can really easily kind of group it together. It's all about, again, you know, if you didn't have series, if you didn't list one, you know, whatever it is, you're going to make it very difficult for the end reader to find out, you know, if they're looking for that next series, they're going to make it you're making it harder for them to find that, the newer series that have come out.
Is there a version of that for things like workbooks? Like, there's like a book about creativity, and then there's the workbook that goes with it. It's not really a series, but it's certainly related, and publishers would want to promote them together.
Yeah. So there isn't, I don't believe there's a specific data field like series or editions that will kind of work in that way, but um, we can do a mapping whereby we kind of provide information and someone can go, okay, it has to match on the same author, publisher, and there's another aspect, and you can kind of group it that way. So we will do that mapping and send it out as well. So there's nothing that within the data you can provide, but we can do a specific kind of mapping our side. Yeah.
Cool. There's a question about how do you see, like, if a publisher wanted to see like a great example of metadata for a book in their category. I know that there's certain sites, certain retailer sites that you can see like the front-facing metadata stuff, but how do they find out like the behind the curtain stuff? Is there?
Yeah. I mean, we can certainly run and provide examples. That wouldn't be any issue at all. Yeah, by all means, we can kind of pull out from our system. This is kind of a very good record with all this relevant information, and you can kind of see the type of data that has been provided to us by whoever it may be.
Cool. Sonia has a really interesting question about, sorry, not to grade questions. All the questions have been fabulous. There's this question that I find particularly intriguing, which is the ability to put comp titles in metadata. And that the question is, if you're doing that, should you be going back into your backlist to update to newer comp titles as time goes by? This is a bit related to the fact that you should be updating your metadata pretty on some sort of regular basis. I don't know what you all recommend, but so it's like two questions, I guess. Like Sonia's question, should you be going back into the descriptions to update them to more recent comps if you have them? And then I'm also curious, how often do you recommend publishers go through the metadata and like refresh it and keep it up to date?
Yeah, I mean, it's uh I mean for example the descriptions it is semi-static and you can change it as many times as you want as frequent as you like as well. I think um you can be kind of not clever, but you can kind of experiment. So it's a little bit similar with keywords, right? So um, you can chop and change your keywords because you might find that certain keywords do way better than others. Certainly on particular websites. I know I've worked with a publisher that did a massive project on keywords, and they've just been they were constantly updating and changing their keywords every 4 days until they kind of were noticing quite a big impact. Um, so again, with descriptions, I mean, really, there's not going to be a massive amount that that would be changing there. But again, it's completely up to you. You can go back in and change and update. Now, how often you do that? If we're looking at backlists, a lot of publishers will not ignore, but once it's there, it's there, and they only ever focus on their front list. Now, that's not to say backlists don't sell don't sell at all. Like it's for some publishers, it's a massive part of their business. So and a part of that is the data. So make sure if there is something that needs updating, just go in and update it. Certainly when it only takes a couple of seconds to do. And granted, I appreciate that there might be a bit of a project at the start to do like a mass update, but once you're on top of it, it's good. It'll be very easy to handle. So, yeah, frequency is really down to the individual. I would make sure it's just really about making sure what is out there is correct.
Cool. Any final advice or recommendations, I guess, from both Chris and Suzy? Suzy, how do we get one of our books on that top five?
Oh, luck, good metadata, TikTok.
My top tip
Chris,
would my top tip would be try and provide your data at least 4 weeks ahead of publication. Don't leave it on the day of the book being published. Why? Hopefully you'll get a load of pre-sales. And also you were informing the industry of your book is coming out. So that's my top
We
tip.
also can't report the sales if we don't have metadata for it. So
Yep.
it won't hit bestseller lists if we can't report the sales of it.
Well, cool. I'm cognizant that we've gone over a few minutes. Thank you both so much. This was really fascinating. I'm going to turn off the recording. Everyone watching the recording, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you at a future IBPA event.
Thank you.